catching sunfish, bluegill, fall fish, suckers, anything, creek chub, anything like that. The longer the bait, I'm going to hook it in the head. If it's a panfish, I'm going to hook it in the back. And I'm going to fish baits anywhere from 3 to about 8 inches. The flatheads are going to eat them head first. So I'm going to hook my bigger baits and closer to the front. If it's a 3-inch sunfish, I'm going to hook it closer to the tail. So that's how I'm going to use them. I did have a rig I wanted to show you here, but it disappeared on us. It's basically, I took a bobber and I drilled a hole in it. I put BBs in it, I epoxied it shut, and I put it on a little piece of string with a swivel on one end, a swivel on the other end. Tie it to the main line, and then tie your hook here. And then every time that fish moves, that bait rattles. So that's just another attractant. I do that a lot in muddy water, but again, if the fish are telling me they like that rig more than another rig, I'm going to tie more often. So again, this is what the fish are telling me. As far as catching the bait, the biggest issue I see when people are pan fishing is number 1, they use too big of a hook, and number 2, they use too big a bait. When we go fishing for panfish, I'm using a very small, like a 1/80th ounce jig. Pass one of them around. I'm using a slip float. Pass these around as well. So my jig is so small and so light, if I'm fishing my bobber here and I throw it out, it will not pull the line down. That jig is that light. So I got to add a piece of split shot here. And you throw it out, and then it'll sink, and then this slip bobber will rise up, rise up, rise up, until it hits a stop. So here's where my bait is. So if I'm fishing a creek and I start below a bridge, that hole's normally going to be about 5 feet. So I might have to bait this deep. As I walk down the creek, it gets shallower. I might only want this bait at 12 inches. I'm going to take this rubber stop, slide it down, and now I cast out. The bobber comes up, it hits a stop. Now my bait's right here. If I'm fishing in a lake and fish are suspended at 15 feet, I can take that rubber stop, put it up at the 15-foot mark. It will come through my eyelids, and it will wrap around my spool, and I can cast it out. So this one stop will allow me to fish different depths. We're handing them out so you can see them. Pretty economical, maybe $3 or $4 a pack. You might get maybe 4 or 5 on a loop, and those can come in different sizes. So if you want to use them for another species, and you want to use a 12-pound test or something, you can buy them to match that. This is only 4-pound test. This split shot, we had a situation, we wanted to just early spring, we wanted to go out to a lake and see if we could get some panfish early in the year, get them ready for flathead bait. And we were fishing, we marked a lot of fish, they were way up behind the water column, using our slip float, and basically they were biting it, but they wouldn't even pull the bobber up. They were just, it's like they touch it and leave, touch it and leave. And what we found was, we weren't sure they were spooked for some reason. So we took the split shot and we slid it up about 6 inches. Now, just that little adjustment, now they were a little more aggressive. I'm assuming as they touched it, they couldn't feel the extra weight. Now they ate it, now we were catching fish. Why? Because we listened to what the fish told us. Just a simple adjustment made all the difference in the world on that particular day. You've got that little jig. I'm only using a 1/2-inch piece of worm. That's all you need. And you worry about, people say about, you need a bigger hook than that. It's not true. As we're catching bait, I'm catching largemouth bass. I caught channel cats on it. The biggest problem I have with 4-pound tests is those bigger fish are breaking the line. But adjust your drag, you can land them, and those little hooks will work well. Had an experience where my father and I went to catch bait, and we're on the river, we came around a bend to where there's an area where there's a lot of submerged logs. A lot of panfish hang out there. And I got to that location, and the father's on the front of the boat, and he's bass fishing. And a youngster, I don't know how old he was, but he was able to cast, and he had one of those little Mickey Mouse rods, and he's throwing out this big bobber, about 3 or 4 inch bobber, and I can see the bobber going like this, and he's jerking, the bobber's going, he's jerking. And we said hello, we went past him, and I got about 30 yards downriver, and that little kid's still doing this. I said to my dad, I said, Dad, I can't help myself, I gotta go back. He says, do what you gotta do, boy. So I went back and I asked the father, I said, hey, do you mind if I help your son? I see he's panfishing. He goes, sure, whatever. He's bass fishing. So the little boy handed me his rod, and sure enough, he had that big bobber on. He had a 1-aught hook, and he's fishing night crawlers. What was going on is those fish were hitting that night crawler down, down, down. They'd get to that big hook, and they wouldn't bite it. So he was just a waste of bait. You know, I took a minute, I rigged him up properly, said have a great day. We didn't get more than 10 or 15 yards downriver, and he's yelling, I got one, I got one. So just a little tweak allowed him to catch those fish. So again, pay attention to what the fish are telling you, and you'll put more fish in the boat. In Pennsylvania, we said that you can't use a trap or a net or anything. So I'm fortunate enough that I have a bait maker. And so what fish do I use? What bait do I use? It's whatever my bait maker gets. And she's a wonderful helper. My wife Linda, she's my bait maker. She runs a video camera. So I highly encourage you, get one of them. Get yourself a bait maker. Now, with that bait, with those flatheads, 2 of the biggest issues, very finicky. The second thing is, now you got to care for the bait. You got to keep it alive. You got to catch it. You got to get it back to your vehicle. You got to get it home. You got to store it. So what we do is I'll carry a 5-gallon bucket. Catch the bait, put it in a 5-gallon bucket. In the back of the truck, we've got a Fraybill bait station that runs off of batteries, where you can plug it into your cigarette lighter. If you don't want to spend the money for one of those, get yourself an insulated cooler, or one of your old coolers, drill a hole in the top, mount your aerator to the side with gator clips, get a little tractor battery, plug it in, run that hose in there. Now you got a good way to transport your bait. Watch your bait in your bucket. In the summertime, I might only be able to catch 10 baits, and then I got to get them back to the truck. They're going to start going belly up on you, chewing up all that oxygen. In cold weather, I've kept as many as 25 in a 5-gallon bucket, healthy as can be, so I got them back to the truck. So read the weather, read the fish, to tell you what to do. Now you get them home. Now what are you going to do? Well, you got to keep that bait alive. So I started out using a cooler. Well, now I can't keep as many in there as I want. I got several coolers. So now you're constantly dealing with 3 different coolers. It's got to be a pain. So I thought, my neighbor has a pond. I'll talk to my neighbor and see if he'll allow me to keep them down there. He said, absolutely. My father and I went down, built this nice little dock, took 55-gallon drums, drilled holes in them, mounted them there, great bait container. Put the bait in it. I got to run a trip. I go down to get my bait. Uh-oh. Feathers all over the place. Pieces of fish all over the place. The herring got in there and messed up my bait. I know how to fix that. Made some nice lids. Build the bait tanks. Put lids on the bait tanks. I go down, get my bait. Uh-oh. The lid's pushed off. Apparently, raccoons or something pushed the lids off. I got dead carcasses all over the place again. Okay. I know how to fix that. Put a cinder block on the lid. Go back down to get my bait. Now we're into the summertime. All of a sudden, algae blooms everywhere. And I go down, I pull the lid off my bait stick because the algae chewed up all the oxygen. So, failed experiment again. What do I do now? If you're ever driving around and in a farmer's field, you'll see those big white containers in a metal cage collecting waste oil, right? I bought one of those, cut the lid out, mounted my aerator to the side, run an extension cord to it, put a drain on the bottom. I can run fresh water in, open the valve, run the old water out. I can keep like 70 baits in there, no problem. And I can flush it real easy. I'm on well water, I just flush it maybe 2 or 3 times a week. and it works out great. I've stored 70 baits in there. It's hard to tell how long because I'm always rotating my baits, but I know easily I can keep them there a month with no issues. I do not feed them. If you feed them, now you're just adding other ammonia and other contaminants in there that you're going to have to flush out more regularly. Last year we sold our property. I moved everything to my home, built a garage, have an office there. It was late in the year, it was October. I thought it's nice and cool. I don't have to worry about my bait. Run an extension cord out there, and the bait will be nice and cool to be fine. Well, I was wrong again. Basically what happens is the sun heats that plastic up, algae developed in that tank. I lost like 50-some baits one day. So, lesson learned, before this year I will move that tank inside to avoid that sunlight. Now, I had 50-some baits there. I didn't want to waste them. I chunked them up. I soaked them in what we have here is dead red blood spray. Put them in a gallon bag, soaked them in there, marinated them up good, and I froze them. So now, in March, when I start fishing, I'm going to have cut bait right there. Quickly, once we get to October, flatheads will roam and they're going to school up. Almost like bass will, they will school up in a particular area. Now I break out another tool in my arsenal. It's an underwater camera. I'll go out where I know deep water is, I'll drop the underwater camera and I'll move around slowly on my trolling motor. I'll find flatheads all schooled up. In that particular situation, our booth's right back here. If you go there, the last picture in the catfish book, you can see pictures of flathead laying on the bottom. And they're in there side by side, laying on each other. They're just in there stacked crazy. So in late October into early November, depending on your water temperatures, we can actually go in there and we can jig those fish. I stumbled upon this bass fishing in a wintering hole. I would get a bite and go to set the hook, wouldn't have anything there. Bring it in and my hook's bent. And I'm fishing with my normal bass jig. Miss a fish, the hook's bent. And then eventually I caught one that was a flathead. So I thought, well, apparently they'll hit a jig. So basically this has evolved over a period of 7 years now, to the point I have confidence that those fish will move in there in October. I'll go in there with my bass gear and I'll actually jig them. But while I'm doing that, I will drop down cut bait and live bait while we're jigging. So we got two different actions working there. Then it's going to get colder and colder, and eventually they're going to stop biting. I've gone in there in those wintering holes when it's real cold, drop my camera down, actually bump the flathead, and go like this. The dust comes off their backs, and they don't even move. They just do that. Like, leave me alone, I'm going back to bed. So I quit messing with them. Then here, I think it was last year in February, I started looking for them, and you'll go in there and you'll foul hook some, but they'll start to bite that jig. And first time, you know, you might have 10% bite. Get a couple degree temperature bump, you might get 20%, 30%. You'll get up where you got 80% of them are hitting your jig just like a basket. And that's a lot of fun, it's great. And then all of a sudden it's gone. They hit a certain temperature and they scatter. They go back roaming like they do in the summertime. Then I don't mess with them until summertime. I fish them for dark. When they're schooled up like that, that's when I'll run a 4-hour trip and we'll go in there and we'll jig them, and I will do that in the daytime. Don't have to do it at night. So that's a little bit about those flatheads. When we're doing that, I will start out with the warmer the weather, I'll fish maybe a 3.5-inch Berkeley minnow, and as it gets colder, I'll downsize to a Berkeley gulp, and that's downsize my bait. Any questions on anything we've discussed today?